Alrighty, so we're now into week number 11 of the 2022 MLS regular season, and as usual, I am going to do the preview of the 12 games that's going to be happening on Saturday, and tomorrow I'll do the preview of the Sunday game, which there's only going to be 2 games that's going to be happening on Sunday, and I believe both of those games is going to be on national television. But what's also interesting is that after this weekend's action, we have our first big midweek action in the regular season. And I know this year MLS have tried their best to limit the amount of midweek games because, you know, midweek games, not only the fact that the players don't like it, the fact that they have to play so many midweek games, and add to the fact that you have the US Open Cup, fixture congestion is starting to become a problem for some of these teams. But it's also a problem for fans too, because midweek games are usually the hardest one in terms of having some good attendance, and you're going to see a lot of empty seats as we talk about some of these midweek games that's going to be happening in a couple of days. But in terms of the 12 games action, well, it seems like we're going to have 2 matinee games, and then there's going to be a bunch of night games that is going to happen. In fact, at one point, there's going to be 7 games that's going to be happening at the same time, which, when that happens, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to throw my hands up and say, well, you know what? I'm just going to watch as much as I can, and at the same time, I know I'm also going to ground hop too, because, you know, we have so many games to keep track of. It's just best for me to just watch the highlights later instead of trying my best to keep track of every single game and so forth, because, you know, I can only watch as much soccer and much MLS action before I just get completely overwhelmed. But let us begin with the first game of the 12 games action, which is Toronto versus Orlando City. This game will start at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 3:08 p.m. local time. For TFC, they're in a free fall in these last couple of games, 3-2-6, and have lost, I believe, 4 in a row coming into this one, where they face against an Orlando City side that have a 5-2-4 record. All-time meeting, TFC does lead the all-time meeting with an 8-3-4 record, but the last 5 games, as I mentioned, for Toronto, it's been an absolute free fall. They lost 1-0 against Vancouver, lost 2-0 against Cincinnati, lost 2-1 again to Cincinnati, this time at home, lost 5-4 in that shootout against NYCFC, and the last victory was against NYCFC, where they win 2-1 in that game. So it's kind of weird, the fact that I've now realized that TFC, basically the last 2 opponents that they have faced besides Vancouver, are literally the 2 opponents that they play in terms of the meeting. So yeah, I mean, or actually, I'm sorry, they did not lose 2-1 to NYCFC. Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird to see that is the case, but they actually won 2-1 against the Philadelphia Union, and they're the only team to, of course, give the Union a loss this season. And we'll talk a little bit later on where the Union is going to be playing, because they're probably only playing in a game that is considered the game of the week. But for Orlando, you know, they got absolutely walled up in the last game against Montreal 4-1. But before that, they won 2-1 against Charlotte, lost 3-0 at home against the Red Bulls, won 2-0 on the road against Columbus, and then winning 1-0 against the Chicago Fire. And that it's safe to say that this Orlando City team has been very inconsistent this year. Though, despite the inconsistency, they're somehow in the hunt in the playoff position. Well, actually not in the hunt, but they're actually in a playoff position in 4th position. So yeah, we'll see whether or not if they can bounce back, because it seems like with this team being inconsistent, they always find a way to, of course, bounce back, and especially against a TFC team that you would think that this is a game that you know, they need to at least get something out of it, because it's been not great for Bradley's team, and that this team is definitely going through a free fall, even worse than when they had in the beginning of the season. But moving on, we got the Colorado Rapids versus LAFC. So this game will also, this game will start at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. But what I was also going to say is that this is the same time when LAFC play against the Colorado Rapids earlier this season. And just like earlier this season, this game is going to be on Twitter and on 2DN, and the actual kickoff is 1:50 p.m. local time. All-time meeting, LAFC so far has dominated this meeting with a 5-0-2 record. But remember, the last time both of these teams faced off against each other at Dick's Sporting Goods Park, Colorado absolutely wallop LAFC. In fact, that was probably one of the worst losses we've seen LAFC suffer, where they lost 5-2 against a Rapids team that ended up finishing the top of the Western Conference on decision day. Now, in terms of the last 5 games for the Rapids, well, it has not been great. They lost 1-0 against the Quakes on the road. They did win 2-0 against the Timbers, but then drew 0-0 against Charlotte, lost 3-1 on the road against Minnesota, and lost 3-1 against FC Dallas. For LAFC, it's been an incredible start to the season. Despite the 2-2 draw that they had against the Union, they won 2-0 against Minnesota, won 2-1 against FC Cincinnati, won 3-1 against Sporting KC, and lost 2-1 against the Galaxy, as that is kind of the only loss that they have suffered of what has been a team that has started to run away in the Supporters' Shield standing and started to look like what we saw in 2019 when LAFC was head and shoulder above everybody else so far. So yeah, for the Rapids, not going to be easy to slow down a very hot LAFC team, but we'll see whether or not if they can do so, and maybe get some revenge after what happened earlier this season, where yeah, they were in the victim of many teams that just getting overmatched by LAFC this season. But moving on, we got Charlotte FC taking on Montreal, and coming into this game, Montreal, you talk about one of the hottest team in the league. I mean, them alongside of LAFC is probably the hottest team in the league right now, because Montreal, I believe they have the longest active unbeaten streak so far in MLS, with 7 games, and has improved their record to 5-2-3. While Charlotte, definitely a team that, you know, coming into this expansion season, and really right now in their expansion season, it's actually been pretty good. I mean, 4-1-6, and they especially have been very good at home. In fact, all 4 wins so far that they had in their expansion season has come at Bank of America Stadium, and they've only lost once so far this season at Bank of America Stadium. This game will start at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. You know, anytime when Charlotte is playing against an opponent, you know that this, of course, is the first ever meeting between both of these teams. Now, in the last 5 games, Charlotte did win 1-0 against Inter Miami, but they did lose 2-1 against Orlando City. They got their first ever road point against the Rapids in this one, where they drew 0-0 before losing 2-1 on the road to New England, and then winning 1-0 against Atlanta United. For Montreal, as I mentioned, won 4-1 against Orlando City, won 2-1 against Atlanta United, drew 1-1 against the Union, and actually, I got this one wrong here. Should be MTL. And keep in mind, I did this relatively late last night, so I'm bound to see some mistakes that I, of course, made on the board. But before that, they won 2-1 against Vancouver, and then they've gone on the road against the Red Bulls and went 2-1 in that one too. So again, you know, Wilfred Nancy team is just an absolute fuego mode right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to do against a Charlotte team that also has been in fuego mode when they are playing at home. And you could maybe even say this easily could be one of the more underrated match of this weekend. I mean, I know a lot of people will kind of talk about this match specifically, as we'll mention in just a bit, and maybe the national television match that we'll talk about tomorrow on Sunday. But this is definitely an underrated game, with the way that two teams that you know, with one of them are pretty much building their home stadium as labeling them as a fortress, with them winning pretty much every single game, and then Montreal, of course, being one of the hottest, if not the hottest team right now, with the longest active unbeaten run. But now moving on to the next game, we got NYCFC versus the Columbus Crew, and NYCFC have a 4-2-3 record, while Columbus have a 3-4-3 record. This game, of course, will start at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific also, and the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. In fact, this is the first of 3 games that's going to be, or actually the second of 3 games that's going to be kicking off at the same time. All-time meeting, Columbus actually leads the all-time meeting with a 9-4-6 record. In terms of the last 5 games, well, in the last game, NYCFC, their record, actually, again, I wrote it wrong here. It's actually not Columbus that they faced. They actually faced against Sporting KC. But yeah, their offense, which was one of the hottest, if not the hottest in the league, kind of came into a bit of a halt against SKC, as they drew 0-0 in that one. But before that, they won 3-0 against San Jose, won 5-4 against Toronto, won 6-0 against RSL, before losing 2-1 to Toronto FC. For Columbus, they drew 2-2 against New England in the last game, won 3-0 against DC. They drew 0-0 to Sporting KC, lost 2-0 against Columbus, and then lost 1-0 against the Philadelphia Union. Or actually, I'm sorry, they lost 2-0 to Orlando City. They didn't just lose them by themselves. And also, I am a little bit tired right now with the way they've just finished a long day of work. But yeah, for Columbus, they're starting to slowly turn the season around a little bit. I mean, when you look at the points total, at least in the last 3 games, they have got themselves 5 points out of a possible 9, which is not a bad thing, consider they were on a bit of a downfall just a couple of weeks, and really in the last month in general. But it's not going to be easy when they're going to be going on the road again, and we know road has been a problem for Columbus throughout not just this season, but even in their previous season. And they're about to play against an NYCFC team that is going to be back playing at Yankee Stadium and is back playing in their friendly confine. I mean, I know so far everybody has made the jokes about NYCFC playing in so many different stadiums, but I think you can safely say that they really want to be at Yankee Stadium, because it seems like this season, at least with games that is played at Yankee Stadium, they feel the most comfortable, and they have won pretty much every single game that they play at Yankee Stadium so far this season. But now moving on, in the next match, we got the Vancouver Whitecaps versus the San Jose Earthquakes, as this game will start at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I would say that this game would be what you call the sad derby of the week, or you could say this is the wooden spoon derby, because with the way that both of these teams were like sitting in the bottom of the Western Conference, it looked like that, of course, was the case. Well, for the Whitecaps, unfortunately, they're still in the bottom of the Western Conference right now, despite getting a win in the last one. But that's not the case for the San Jose Earthquakes. And again, I still refuse to believe that this is the beginning of the Quakes start to make a playoff push, because I've seen this before. I've seen that they sometimes go for a good run, and especially with the way that, I know Alex Covello has done a great job for the Quakes, but how much is that because of the fact that, when you are a interim head coach coming into a team that has low morale, it's pretty easy to get that morale back to a very good level, because the players are going to really play for you and really want to impress the new boss. Or, as I've said before, anytime when a team has a new head coach or an interim head coach, you get that boost, and we'll see whether or not if that boost can continue for the rest of the season. But they're not that far in terms of the playoff position. I think they're only like 5 points back. Consider early in the season it looked like they were down and out. But in terms of the all-time meeting, Vancouver does lead this all-time meeting with an 11-11-8 record. Now, the last 5 games for the Whitecaps, they of course finally ended their long winless run with a 1-0 win against Toronto. Before that, it was a 3-0 win that they had, or 3-0 loss that they had against Austin, a 2-1 loss to Montreal, a 3-2 loss at home against the Timbers, and then they did win 1-0 against Sporting KC. And did I say that they had a long winless run? Technically, their winless run was actually only 3 games, but it felt like a long time with the way how the Whitecaps has really not done well this season. For the Quakes, of course, they won 1-0 at home against Colorado. They did lose 3-0 on the road against NYCFC, but they finally getting their first win of the season, winning 4-3 against Seattle of all team. And then they drew 2-2 against Nashville, and then lost 4-3 against Houston. But keep in mind, this was back when Mateus Almeida was still the head coach of this team, and that this team were playing in some of the most craziest and you could maybe say some of the most entertaining soccer if you're neutral, but certainly as a fan of a team, probably one of the most headache and nightmare kind of soccer that I've seen. But like I said, for the Quakes, I would say that if there's any road game that is winnable for them, this of course is going to be the case. But knowing the Quakes and how I say winnable road game, yeah, that does not exist in the San Jose Earthquakes world. I mean, this team always find ways to lose against opponent that they should be able to beat on the road, and I won't be surprised if Vancouver can pull one off, because Vancouver this season, as bad as they have been this year, actually haven't been that bad at home. In fact, they actually haven't had a lot of home games. They've been on the road for a lot of their games, but at least at home this season, I believe they only have lost once this season at home. So this is not a team that is an easy team to play when they're playing at BC Players. And you could maybe even say that this is kind of both of these teams are kind of having similar season, because for the Quakes this season at home, they're also a team that is not easy to play, and that they only lost one game time so far at home, and they have significantly more home games than what the Vancouver Whitecaps had this year. But now moving on into the last game on this board, and probably the game that should have been on national television, and I can't believe it's not, is Philadelphia Union versus the New York Red Bulls. So this, of course, is not only the battle of the top two team in the Eastern Conference, but this also could be the game where the Red Bulls could make some history. I mean, they have already tied the LA Galaxy for the longest winning streak to start the season on a row, and they have a chance to make history here, becoming the first team to win their first 6-row game to start the season. And they, of course, have a 5-3-2 record compared to the Union have a 5-4-1 record. This game also, or actually no, I'm sorry, this game will start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. I was going to say that this game start the same time as these three, but that, of course, is not the case. Last 5 games, for the Union, they play an entertaining 2-2 draw against LAFC. They drew 1-1 against Nashville, drew 1-1 against Montreal, lost 2-1 against Toronto in the first game, and then won 1-0 against Columbus. In fact, the Union, believe it or not, despite the fact that they're being at the top of the Eastern Conference, they have gone winless in the last 4 games, and that, yeah, things have definitely not looked as good for Jim Kern team as we saw in the beginning of the season. But for the Red Bulls, I talk about this season being probably the craziest season that I've seen the team had to beginning in the year, because again, this team, they can win on the road, but they can't win at home. And it's unsurprising in the last game that trend continued, as they drew 1-1 against the Portland Timbers, but then they win 2-1 on the road against Chicago, won 3-0 on the road against Orlando City, drew 0-0 against FC Dallas, and then, of course, losing 2-1 at home against Montreal. And again, I know that when you look at how the Red Bulls play, maybe you can understand that, with the way that they like to play, and especially a team that likes to play on the transition and don't like to just have the ball. In fact, I mentioned before, I think they still have the lowest percentage of possession of any team so far this season. And when you do that, that kind of is how you play on the road, because on the road you're not going to get as much possession as you would be at home. But still, it is incredibly crazy the fact that this team have not won a single game at home, and yet on the road they have won so many games. Like, if this was maybe compared to them winning every single game at Ripple Arena and then not getting any points on the road, that's understandable, because we've seen that has happened. But the fact that this is kind of opposite, it's something completely out of the ordinary. And again, they have a chance to make history of becoming the first team in MLS history to start the season with 6 wins on the road in a row. But if they are going to do it, they're going to have to do it against probably a team that is known to get home wins, and a team that has already built their stadium and built Subaru Park as a fortress in this. I mean, not a lot of team, if any, has able to walk out of that stadium with all 3 points, and we'll see whether or not if the Red Bulls can complete that task and make history out of this game. But that being said, I am now going to switch boards and look at the last 6 games that's going to be happening on Saturday. So moving on into the next game, we got the Chicago Fire versus FC Cincinnati, and both of these teams are basically heading in opposite direction, because believe it or not, FC Cincinnati is a team that I think everybody in the league now knows that they're not a laughing stock anymore, and not a team that when you face them, it's automatic 3 points, because lately they have really catch fire with them winning, I believe, let's see, yeah, they won 3 in a row coming into this game, and they have a chance to make it 4 in a row, because they're playing against a struggling Chicago Fire team that has a record of 2-4-4 and are sitting dead last in the Eastern Conference. This game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. And also, if you're an FC Cincinnati fan watching this, it's okay to have hope. Hope is something that I'm pretty sure every Cincinnati fans have not had in really ever since they came in to MLS. And I know that you can maybe see some pessimistic Cincinnati fans will say that, yeah, this is just kind of false hope. Well, it's okay to believe it in that, because, as a fan of the Quakes, and also for the Loons, and especially for the Quakes, I know what false hope feels like. But I kind of feel like when you look at the Cincinnati team, maybe this isn't just false hope. Maybe this is just a beginning of what could be great, because I've said it before. I think this season is by far the best season that FC Cincinnati has had coming into the league, and all credits has to go to Pat Nolan, who has really transformed this team, and maybe even ahead of schedule in terms of being this team right in the mix of maybe even do the unthinkable and make the playoffs this year. But in terms of the all-time meeting, Cincinnati even have a good all-time record against Chicago, 3-2-2. Well, I say it's good, but you know, when you look at it, it's not actually really spectacular. But in FC Cincinnati case, anytime when they have a winning record against an opposition, it's a bonus. Consider they have been a laughing stock of the league for most of the time, and you would think that the all-time meeting, whenever they face an opponent, will always be on the losing side. But that's not the case when they face against Chicago. They've already won 3 times against them and only lost twice so far in the all-time meeting. But in terms of the last 5 games, like I said, for the Fire, it has just gone bad in these last couple of games. I mean, they lost 4-1 against Atlanta United, lost 2-1 at home against the Red Bulls, lost 3-0 against Minnesota, drew 0-0 against the Galaxy, and then lost 1-0 against the Chicago Fire. I mean, they're in a 5-game winless skid right now, and all of a sudden, you know, not only the fact that they still have problems in terms of scoring, but now they have problems in terms of defending too. And this was supposed to be a team that was one of the most locked down, if not the most locked down defense in the league. And again, I've said it before, you know, your defense can only do as much until it finally crumble, and it feels like that's the case for this Fire team, where their defense are just absolutely crumble because of the amount of pressure that they have to withstand of getting a clean sheet, knowing the fact that their offense probably isn't going to do much. But like I said, it's not going to be easy in this game for them to recover it, because you know, Cincinnati, this is a team that is looking to trying to go above 500. As I mentioned, 5-1-5. They're at the 500 mark, and if they can do so, I think this will be the first time I've seen Cincinnati able to break the 500 mark and have more wins than losses in a very long time. Like, I don't think not since in the beginning of 2018 when they came into the league. That, of course, was the case, because remember, this team actually came into the league relatively good, and then they went into free fall mode for the rest of the season. But now moving on, in the next match, we got the Houston Dynamo versus Nashville SC. So the Dynamo with a 3-3-4 record, while Nashville has a 4-3-3 record. This game will start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. All-time meeting. This is only a third meeting between both of these teams, and Nashville have a 1-1-0 record over Houston. For the Dynamo, yeah, these last couple of games have really been a reality check with them. Losing 2-0 to DC United on the road, losing 2-1 at home against Austin, losing 2-1 on the road against Dallas in the Texas Derby, drew 0-0 against the Portland Timbers, and their last win was a 4-3 win against the San Jose Earthquakes. For Nashville, they of course won 2-0 against RSL at home, their first ever win at Geodis Park. They drew 1-1 in the first ever game at Geodis Park against the Philadelphia Union before losing 1-0 to Nashville, then drew 2-2 against the San Jose Earthquakes, and then win 2-1 on the road against Sporting KC. And by the way, this is the first time that Nashville, of course, are going back on the road ever since their lengthy 8-game road trip to start the season. But good news for Nashville fans, I don't think they're going to be on the road for that long, because as I mentioned, they have a lot of home games in their backlog of the schedule, and you could even say that this is kind of a rare road game that they're going to have with so many home games that's going to be happening in the backlog of the schedule. But let's see if they can maybe get something out of this one against the Dynamo side that, yeah, they are struggling in these last 4 games, and maybe these last 4 games is a great reality check to say that they're not ready in terms of being a playoff contender. And I think maybe Dynamo fans saw this one coming too, because I'm pretty sure a lot of them kind of had that pessimistic view of the fact that, yeah, they're doing well, but I guarantee the bottom, of course, would drop out, and it seems like that, of course, is the case with them going on a 4-game winless run. But now moving on in the next match, speaking of a team that has kind of bottomed out after what it looked like it was kind of a false hope run that they were on, is Inter Miami. They're playing against DC United in this game, with Miami have a 3-1-6 record and DC have a 4-0-5 record. And this game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 8:08 p.m. local time. All-time meeting, I mean, it's been all DC in this all-time meeting, winning their first free meeting against Inter Miami. And in terms of the last 5 games, you know, they lost 1-0 to Charlotte, lost 2-0 against New England. But before that, this is where the false hope kind of began for Inter Miami when they won 2-1 against Atlanta United, won 1-0 against the Seattle Sounders on the road. Like, nobody saw that one coming. And then winning their first ever game of the season by winning 3-2 against New England. For DC, they're kind of having similar success to what the Quakes are having whenever they got a interim head coach in this case with Chad Ashton. They've done relatively well. I mean, they won 2-0 in the last game against Houston. They did lose 3-0 on the road against Columbus, but that was a game that when you actually watch that game, the scoreline didn't indicate the fact that DC actually played relatively well, but they just could not finish, and they were being punished because of that. They won 3-2 against New England in a game where they finally end that long winless run. Before that, it was a 3-2 loss against Austin FC. That turns out to be the final straw for Hernan Losada being as a head coach of this team. And then before that, they lost 1-0 at home against Atlanta United. So yeah, again, this is a game that, again, it's kind of similar where both teams are heading into opposite direction. And for Inter Miami, again, yeah, that good time that they had last month, yeah, it did not last long, and it seems like they could be on verge of heading on another losing run, because that's just how Inter Miami is. When they're hot, but when they're cold, they go dark cold. But for DC, this is a team that, just like the Quakes, as I mentioned, are playing against an easy opponent on the road. But I'm pretty sure DC fans would say that there's no easy opponent or no winnable game for this team, especially with the way that this team does not do well on the road when they play their game away from Audi Field. But now moving on into the next match is RSL versus Austin FC. So as I mentioned in the video that I made back on Wednesday, talk about whether or not if Austin is a contender or a pretender. This is an opportunity to prove that Austin indeed is a contender, because they're going to go on the road playing against RSL, one of the more difficult place to get 3 points. And RSL this season have a 4-4-3 record, while Austin have a 6-2-2 record. This game will start at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. All-time meeting. Both of these teams are playing in their third ever meeting, and both of these teams have one win apiece. For RSL, they of course lost 2-0 against Nashville, but they did win 1-0 against the Galaxy. Drew 0-0 against the Timbers. Got absolutely demolished by NYCFC 6-0. And then they drew 2-2 against Toronto FC. For Austin, they lost their last home game 1-0 against the Galaxy. But before that, they did win 2-1 on the road against Houston. Won 3-0 against Vancouver. Won 3-2 on the road against DC. And then winning 1-0 against Minnesota United. So, again, this is a good test for Austin against an RSL team that, well, yes, RSL has been a little bit inconsistent lately. At least it has kept them above the playoff line. And again, Rio Tinto Stadium is one of the toughest places to get all 3 points out of it. But if Austin can do so, then they can definitely send a message, especially to all those doubters, that maybe this is not a team to be considered to be a pretender. Though I will say that for Austin, if they can get this road trip. Or get this first of what would be very tough schedule that they have in their next 10 games. I mean, I mentioned the schedule for their next 10 games in that video, and it is murderous row. I mean, they are going to be facing against some of the best team in the league, and if they want to get it off to a good start, they need to get something or even get a win out of this game against RSL. But moving on in terms of the next match, and speaking of teams that desperately need a win, is both of these teams. So every week we always have a desperation derby. This is exactly the one, as both of these teams are really struggling this season, and both of these teams are supposed to be better than they are, but they're clearly underachieving and are trying to get off the stride. For the Timbers, they have a 2-6-3 record. In fact, I think they're kind of like the draw kings of MLS, and becoming Nashville SC last season when they draw so many the game. But in this case, for the Timbers, they already suffer almost the same amount of losses that Nashville did for the entire part of last season. Whereas they play against Sporting KC, where the good news for SKC is they no longer are the team that owns with the most loss out of any team in this season. I mean, for a while that of course is the case, but those draws definitely help in terms of them not owning the task of basically having the most loss to the season at any part of the regular season. But this game will start at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. The Timbers have a slight edge in the all-time meeting with an 8-7-7 record. But in terms of the last 5 games for the Timbers, they drew 1-1 against the Red Bulls on the road, but then they lose 2-0 against Colorado. Drew 0-0 against RSL, drew 0-0 against the Houston Dynamo, and then won 3-2 against the Vancouver Whitecaps. For Sporting KC, they drew 0-0 against NYCFC, drew 2-2 against FC Dallas, drew 0-0 against the Columbus Crew, lost 3-1 against LAFC, and then lost 2-1 against Nashville. So if you want to take an optimistic approach, if you're a Sporting KC fan, at least they have been unbeaten in the last 3 games. But if you want to take a pessimistic view, well, they're also winless in the last 3 games with 3 straight draw. And again, this is a game that both teams are desperate in terms of trying to get all 3 points. And whenever you have a desperation derby like that, you know that anything besides 3 points for both of these teams is not going to be good enough. And we'll see whether or not who exactly will get those 3 points to really kickstart the season for both of these teams that were expected to be playoff contender, and now they're basically sitting below the red line, which is something we did not expect this deep into the early part of the season. And then finally, heading into the last game of the Saturday night action and the 12 games that's going to be happening on Saturday is the Galaxy versus FC Dallas, as this is going to be the late game, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. All-time meeting between both of these teams, since both of these teams are teams that came into the league since its inception. You're going to have a big all-time record, with the Galaxy slightly leading in the all-time meeting, 39, 13, and 34 over FC Dallas. The Galaxy have a 6-1-3 record, while Dallas have a 5-4-1 record. In terms of the last 5 games, you know, the Galaxy, they won 1-0 on the road against Austin, though they lost 1-0 on the road against RSL, won 1-0 against Nashville SC, drew 0-0 against Chicago, and then won 2-1 against LAFC. So as you can see, goals have definitely come hard to come by for this Galaxy team, and that's kind of crazy to say, because for the past couple of years that's just not been the case for this team. Like, goals should be easy to come for this team, but you know that guy called Chicharito and how he's on a 4-game goal drought? Yeah, that is probably the reason why this team is struggling on the attacking front. But at least the defense has done well. I mean, the defense has only gave up 1 goal in the last 4 games, and if I would have told you that was the case in the beginning of the season, you would think that I would be crazy, considering I always make jokes about how this Galaxy defense has always been one of the worst, and this season it's been probably the best that they have looked in a very long time. Now for FC Dallas, they did win 2-0 against the Seattle Sounders, but you gotta remember, it wasn't the Seattle Sounders that they faced. In fact, I should have put Tacoma Defiance, because that was literally the team that they faced in that last game. But they did drew 2-2 against SKC in a game that they should have won if they didn't blow a 2-0 lead. They did win 2-1 against Houston, drew 0-0 against the Red Bulls, and then winning 3-1 against the Colorado Rapids. And again, unsurprisingly, FC Dallas this season, a lot of their wins this year has come at home. They're one of the best team in terms of getting result at home, but they're also one of the worst team in terms of getting a result on the road. So this is a game where you know, I know this might be a tough task for Dallas to get all 3 points, but you know, the Galaxy, I still think that, you know, the last couple of games there should be some concern in terms of the Galaxy fan base. I mean, yes, the defense has done well, but now the offense have dried up, and it's got to be so frustrating if you're a Galaxy fans, because you know that there's times where your defense perform well and then the offense struggle, and then when the offense aren't doing well, the defense struggle. So there's literally no balance, and that's kind of like almost purgatory whenever you see a team does that. But again, let's see if they can maybe get another 3 points in this one against a relatively confident Dallas team that, you know, I think you can say that Dallas has really not only met their expectation, but are kind of exceeding their expectation. And I haven't given enough credit to talk about Nico Estevez, that has quietly becoming one of the most underrated head coach in the league, and that I don't think a lot of people give him enough credit what he has done to this Dallas team. Consider, again, when you look at this team, it's not, I mean, yes, they did make some big signings this offseason, and pretty much all their big signings this offseason has paid off, and that's not always the case for a team. I mean, just ask the Chicago Fire how their life has been this season after they make some big signing that looked like it will turn around their season, and it just have not been the case. But either way, that is pretty much it for my prediction, or not prediction, but my preview for all 12 of these games. Let me know in the comments below your prediction in terms of these 12 games, and what do you think about these 12 games, and which one you're looking forward to the most out of the Saturday action. Again, tomorrow I will do the preview of the Sunday game, and I'll also do the review of the matinee games that we're going to have, because I know we do have a slight gap between the 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock period at my time, where there's going to be no MLS games. So good opportunity for me to basically do a little review in terms of those 2 games, and also the preview of the 2 games that's going to be happening on Sunday. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.